Today we're going to look at nature, man's relationship to nature and the natural world, which really varies widely from world cultures and from time to time. The separation between the human and the natural world may be more endemic to Western culture. It certainly is not universal. We see in other cultures, such as in Africa, the Native Americas, and in Asia, a more primary and organic relationship between humans and the natural world. Nature in Asian religions and philosophy, for instance, we see nature as a universal and unifying force, interconnecting all things and beings and creatures. Human concept of Brahman as the unifying deity, the Buddhist concept of Dharma as the cosmic law, and the Taoist concept of the Tao as the way. We all see nature in all of these as a cosmic ordering principle, something that unifies and interconnects all life. Taoism in particular, nature is the Tao, or the way. It's a cosmic force. Back to the ancient writings of Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching in the 5th century BC, we see the dynamic force of nature, the interplay between opposites, the yin, the yang, day, night, dry, wet, dark, cold. We also see a Dionysian spirit in nature, resisting the Apollonian man-made ordering of the world. The Taoists, of course, favor the natural way. The Taoist ethic action is described as wu-wei, or a yielding to nature, the exact opposite of imposing the human will on things. A good example of this in Chinese painting, we see bamboo as a common symbol of flexibility as it bends in the wind. In the Western tradition, on the other hand, we have a much more anthropocentric or human-centered view of nature. It's the Apollonian way, or Apollo, the idea of reason and imposing the human will on all things. After all, the ancient philosopher Pythagoras said man is the measure of all things. And we see this in the Greco-Roman and Abrahamic traditions in the early West. For instance, in Genesis, the verse, "Rule over fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and every living creature that moves upon the ground." We see the human separation over nature and really the hierarchy of man above nature. We also see this in what's described as the urban attitude. For instance, the ancient Greeks saw Athens as the real measure of civilization. For the Romans, Rome was the true center of culture. All roads led to Rome. The great cities and centers of European culture, for instance, throughout history, in Alexandria, Istanbul, Paris, London, New York City, were all centers of the humanities and culture. We also see cities celebrated in American song, from New York, New York, to Chicago, to San Francisco. So the urban attitude in modernity also kind of led to the great migration we see of people from agricultural life to urban lives and city lives. We saw this really during the Middle Ages, at the end of the plague, but even a greater wave in the 19th and 20th century, where most of the people were farmers in the 19th century. By the 20th century, most people were urban dwellers in cities. So the conquest of nature has been one of the many themes in Western humanities. It's shown in Manifest Destiny, the whole westward spread from ocean to ocean of civilization, the idea of bringing of more civilized societies, bringing civilization, the light of civilization, to less civilized societies. The whole myth of cultural imperialism we see in the 19th and 20th century. In Conrad's famous novel, Heart of Darkness, we really show through the lies and the hypocrisy and the darkness that lies at the heart of this quest for civilizing the world in one's own culture. Nature is also idealized in the urban attitude and the urban cultural view. Again, we go back to the Abrahamic tradition of Eden, the garden as paradise. We always see gardens as a getaway and escape from the evils of the city. Natural settings have been idealized in literature, from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. The pastoral setting of shepherds and shepherdesses was always one of innocence. The enchanted forest plays a big part in Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. Only in the forest is it possible to have realms of fairies and magic, according to Renaissance medieval lore. Also, the concept of the noble savage. This came about after the discoveries of the Americas. The idea of Native Americans being totally uncorrupted by city and Western civilization was a common image in all the way up to the Romantic age. In Romanticism, nature really becomes a leading spirit of the age. Nature is seen by the Romantics as the sublime, an awesome force. It finally takes the stature almost of nature in Taoism. In the words of Wordsworth, he describes nature as a motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of thought, and rolls through all things. So nature becomes a true guiding spirit for humanity in Romanticism. The Romantic poets were inspired by nature and really rejected the ills of city life. The philosopher was more commonly to be seen as the wandering, solitary individual on the mountaintop rather than a city dweller. The Lake District was very popular for the early Romantic poets, Wordsworth, Coleridge. The Swiss mountains, the Alps of Switzerland and Italy became a favorite locale for the later Romantic poets, Byron, Shelley, and Keats. In such a landscape, Mary Shelley composed Frankenstein, which was also seen as the myth for modern man, where science, modern man through science, actually takes over the creative process itself. And the ills that befell Frankenstein's creature was kind of a warning of science in the 19th century versus nature. Natural landscapes are very important in Romantic art, Romantic painting. We see it in the landscape paintings of the Romantics, as well as in the American landscape painting. In particular, Transcendentalism becomes the American movement of Romanticism in the United States. Americans were never far from nature. We had a much greater wilderness. Henry David Thoreau exemplifies the transcendental spirit in his famous work, Walden, or Life in the Woods, when here's an urban dweller who by choice goes to the lake of Walden Pond and lives out in the woods for 42 days. And his book is a diary of living in nature. The American painter Thomas Cole did an epic series of 5 paintings called The Course of an Empire, and it shows how man-made empires rise and fall, but nature always pervades supreme. Melville, the famous American author, Moby Dick, many critics saw Moby Dick, the whale itself, as the very force of God. So God becomes truly personified as nature, also in the American imagination. By the 20th century, we see the nature emerging in the environmental movement. Man-made desires of the early 20th century, such as the Dust Bowl, gave proof to a new land ethic. Aldo Leopold in 1949, in one of the FDR scientists, sought to really the new science of sustainability because nature is being depleted so rapidly. Rachel Carlson in the Silent Spring in 1962 was a warning about the ills of DDT. We see it in a lot of our modern literature and cinematography, the environmental movement, the environmental consciousness. We see it in Dr. Seuss's The Lorax, what happens when you cut the last of a tree or an endangered species. We see it in a number of environmentally themed movies, such as Avatar in 2006, the epic struggle of the environment against human encroachment and the human will. So final reflections on nature. There's the interplay between nature and the humanities is very important, vital, and always changing. We see the birth of the environmental sciences and environmental ethics, as well as a growing view of humanity as a global community. So the centrality, the prominence of nature is no longer in question, nor a relationship to it. There's a new view in nature as our home, as in the planet Earth.